Okay.
And I've always maintained that if political space is given to political Islam, and in the past it's been denied, and in fact that is the origin of what the West calls now terrorism, is the fact that Islamists were forced to choose. Either they sort of go to jail in their own countries, or they follow bin Laden's international jihadism. So I think that if there's another option, a middle way, and they have political space, and inevitably will weaken Al-Qaeda in the long run.
Joshua, in Washington, is it in some sort of convoluted way another victory for the United States in that, as we've been pointing out, democracy and free speech uprisings in the Middle East have rendered Al-Qaeda's view a bit useless?
Well, I'm not sure it's settled yet that we're actually going to see democracy flowering in the Middle East, at least based on what's been happening in Bahrain and in Yemen and even to an extent in Libya. We don't have a guarantee yet that what's going to happen after these dictators are thrown off is that you're going to get a free and democratic country. One of the challenges to what's been driving the uprisings is that there doesn't seem to be, at least at a national level, any kind of a coherent ideology. That was kind of the appeal that Al-Qaeda brought to a lot of resistance movements, is that it gave a framework and a certain ideological thrust to the arguments that people were using against the regimes. So I think it's true that Al-Qaeda is not served well by these uprisings, and that's a good thing. But I don't think that we can really say that they discredit Al-Qaeda's message.
Okay, let's just pause for a moment, gentlemen. We've looked at personalities, we looked at the region. I want to look more at the groups. We've talked about the likes of, well, Al-Qaeda as a whole, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Taliban obviously features heavily in that as well. And I want you to have a listen to this, which we've heard from Hillary Clinton commenting on Osama bin Laden's death and making a direct reference to the Taliban. Have a listen.
Our message to the Taliban remains the same, but today it may have even greater resonance. You cannot wait us out. You cannot defeat us, but you can make the choice to abandon Al-Qaeda and participate in a peaceful political process.
Phil Rees in London, would I be being a little naive to think that the Taliban might listen to that in light of bin Laden's death, or does nothing change?
I don't think that their calculation about how successful they are in Afghanistan, and they are, will particularly change because of that. Obviously, from that first generation of jihadists, many of them have married Pashtun people in that region. They've got bayats, loyalty oaths. So these things are still in place. And the Taliban know that time is on their side. It doesn't matter what Hillary Clinton says. And the US is not winning that war. And if they're not winning it, they're actually losing it when it comes to an insurgency. So I don't think it will have a serious effect on the Taliban, nor on any of the other wars that in a way have been post 9/11 and inspired by the ideas of Osama bin Laden.
And nothing for the US to capitalize on there. If I look at it in the most simple terms, the Taliban was harboring bin Laden, the US went in and threw the Taliban out. Still nothing changes?
Well, obviously, it is a symbolic victory. It kind of caps an era here, but in a way that just reinforces the fact that bin Laden's day was done anyway on the battlefield, as it were. But I can see from a symbolic point of view, and obviously from the victims of 9/11 and other attacks, they can see a kind of closure here. But I think beyond that, I think its significance will not be great. I mean, in my view, the significance of the events today, and we may talk about this, is the relations of the US to Pakistan. That is the most stunning thing that has come out of the events of today, in my view. Not simply the death of bin Laden, but where it happened.
Well, let's put that to Dia Rashwan, seeing as you bring it up. We have addressed it in another edition of Inside Story on Osama bin Laden, I must say. But while we're talking about it, the US-Pakistan relationship, it's really been highlighted by this, hasn't it, Dia?
Yes, Pakistan played a very important role in killing Osama bin Laden, and we saw President Obama today speaking about the role of Pakistani's role, and he's thanking for the Pakistan Prime Minister. And I think that the United States alone could not arrest or kill bin Laden. I think that the main role played by the Pakistanis, and it's clear now in Pakistan that Osama bin Laden represents now the most important figure of Al-Qaeda killed, and we have at least 3 highest leaders of Al-Qaeda arrested already in Pakistan: Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Abu Zubaydah, Ramzi bin Sheba, and it's also clear what kind of role played by the Pakistani security in helping and cooperating with the United States.
I'm going to put it to Phil Rees. Have a listen to this, because I can see him shaking his head there. The idea that the US did not involve Pakistan at all, did they, Phil? They said, we don't want you effectively as part of this. We're going to do this on our own and get it right.
Well, listen, I've been to Abbottabad a few times, Kamal. It's a couple of hours out of Islamabad. It's a leafy area. It's full of the dachas, the mansions of generals. It's a military town. I mean, it's got the equivalent of West Point or Sandhurst there. It's a big military atonement. I mean, how possibly could these people not know that bin Laden was there, or at least parts of the Pakistan security services? And if that is the case, I mean, this is the most remarkable double dealing that we've seen. It is unbelievable. Everybody knows that the ISI was involved in the Taliban, with elements within the Taliban playing them, because their military doctrine actually seeks to have a Taliban role there. And I wonder, how on earth was this guy under their noses and not knowing about it? I mean, I don't believe that he's in plain sight. And I think that is the real story that, I'm fascinated with. It needs to come out.
One more issue I want to deal with, just as we do start to run the clock, and we can bring Joshua Fust back and seeing as you are there in Washington DC to look at an American perspective. I'm sure you've seen, Joshua, as we have the celebrations out on the street in Washington and New York as well. The fear of reprisals, though, that must hang over things right now. In the immediate future, the idea that Al-Qaeda, any of its affiliates, that the Taliban, that any of these groups that we talk about in the region will take exception to this.
Yeah, earlier today, the State Department announced that all of their diplomatic outposts, and then also most, if not all, military outposts were increasing their threat readiness level. So the government is definitely being on the lookout for some kind of reprisal attacks. What's going to be interesting to see about this, though, is that there were already a number of operations already in place, in particular within Pakistan, where the security situation can be pretty fragile, but also in other places, particularly in North Africa, and then also around some of the conflict areas in Yemen and maybe some other places. So unless there's a spectacular attack somewhere outside of the Middle East, I think it might actually be pretty difficult to tell whether this is just another pre-planned attack anyways, or if it's something that's specifically meant to be revenge for bin Laden's killing.
Dear Rashwan, what do you think? Do you expect there to be anything? And can we, as Joshua says, can we differentiate to what would be, if I can say, a regular attack versus a bin Laden death-inspired attack?
After the death of bin Laden, offshore will inspire many Islamists around the world to try to make revenge. And I expect in the very short run, very strong operations, especially against American sites, American targets. And also, I think that we can see in this, anarchist situation in the Middle East, because of the revolutions in Yemen, in Egypt, in Tunisia, also to see inside this atmosphere also some operations against Western targets. But in the middle run, Al-Qaeda's idea is falling down now, not only because of the death of bin Laden, but most important because of the replacement of the Arabic very high massive revolutions. In the place of Al-Qaeda, a small group, violent group idea. Now we have the time of revolutions, not the time of changing regimes by force and by very small groups according to the theory of Al-Qaeda. I think that objectively, Osama bin Laden died in the good time. Because Al-Qaeda's idea is died now, and I think it's in the route to die after the high, rank, high level, high, scale revolution in the Middle East. We have now another theory, to make face to the dictatorship, to make face to the corruption, but not the way of Al-Qaeda, but of the coup d'etat. Okay. Then I think that it's a good time for bin Laden to die now.
Okay, dear, thank you for that. Final thought, 30 seconds left for Phil Rees to wrap up for us. I talked about Al-Qaeda at the start of this as multi-layered, multifaceted, disparate, all these things. How would you describe it as a group now. Can you even describe it as a group?
No, it's primarily an idea, but there is a new doctrine that emerged 2 years ago. It was asking Muslims individually to attack the West, those who felt angry about Western foreign policy. We saw it with the bomb over Detroit 2 years ago. We saw it the Fort Hood incident. This has happened recently, that individuals take initiative in their own hands. That was the new doctrine. In terms of the Middle East, I'll just say if the West doesn't involve itself and the Middle East evolves according to its own dynamics, yes, then Al-Qaeda will not have a rationale, because their doctrine is about the distant enemy, about Western involvement in Muslim lands. And if that ceases, certainly Al-Qaeda will have no reason to exist.
What an interesting discussion, gentlemen. 10 years in the making, I might even say. Thank you to all our guests. Joshua Fust in Washington, D.C., Dia Rashwan in Cairo, Phil Rees in London. Thank you. This has been a special edition of Inside Story, one of two, looking at the death, the life and the impact of Osama bin Laden, part of continuing coverage here on Aljazeera, with comprehensive global reaction to this news. I'm Kamal Santamaria. Thanks for being with us here on Inside Story. We'll see you again soon. The news on Aljazeera is next.
Business Latest is brought to you by Catalum, the most efficient and environmentally friendly aluminium smelter. Business Latest is brought to you by Catalum, the most efficient and environmentally friendly aluminium smelter.
All the news, all the time. Aljazeera.net/English.
Imagine a world where flying is living and living is flying. Where everybody is working in harmony, preparing for the big moment, to welcome a special visitor. That visitor is you. This year, you're invited to discover the unlimited world of Turkish Airlines.
For the first time in decades, Singapore's ruling People's Action Party faces its strongest challenge. With rising discontent amongst its citizens, is Singapore ready for a political change? 101 East, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Wanted to make one point.
Taking you straight to the White House press briefing. Jay Carney is hosting it. We are also expecting to hear from the National Security Advisor, Tom Donilon, and John Brennan, the Counterterrorism, Homeland and Security Advisor. But this is Jay Carney we're looking at now. So let's just have a listen in to see what he's got to say.
And yesterday afternoon, and what preceded those events. And then if you have any questions on other subjects, I'll do about 10 minutes after Mr. Brennan is finished to take those questions. I just want to make a point before John comes up that, as many of you know, that the president, even before he was president, when he was a candidate, has a very clear idea about the approach he would take as president towards Osama bin Laden. In August of 2007, he said, if we have actionable intelligence about high-value terrorist targets and President Musharraf won't act, we will. In July of 2008, he said, we must make it clear that if Pakistan cannot or will not act, we will take out high-level terrorist targets like bin Laden if we have them in our sights. he repeated statements like that again, and I just want to be clear that this is an approach that he always felt that he would take when he was president, and then as